Hello, design enthusiasts, and welcome to a conversation about design, the official podcast of Experience House. My name is Amit Patel. I'm the creative director here, and I'm excited today to have a conversation with a true creative leader in the world of inclusive design. Rama, great to have you with us. Why don't we start right off the bat with tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing over the last few years.
Sure, thank you, Amit. My name is Rama. I think I describe myself as a human first, designer second, because that is the right way around. I believe very much in inclusive design, design thinking, and have written a book on creative leadership called Creative Leadership Born from Design, which looks a little bit like this. And it will be coming out as a Penguin paperback. I have had many different roles. I've worked for myself as a designer. I've been the director at the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design over the last decade. But importantly, I use design creativity in spaces and places where there's exclusion. Exclusion by age, by ability, by gender, by race, because I think design is one of those most powerful forces on the planet. So there's a little potted history. I think just to say I um, have sat on a lot of award committees. I am an academic by training as well. Sometimes design and academia don't quite sit well in the same sentence. But more than that, I'm a practical designer, and I have run over 100 projects with governments, business, communities, and importantly, individuals worldwide.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that great intro. There's so many different points I want to jump into, but one of the first ones, particularly for the audience that's listening, can you explain to us like how does, your book, I'm sure kind of delves into this quite a bit, but how does creative leadership differ from traditional leadership models and what kind of advantages do you think it brings to either businesses or to projects?
So creative leadership actually came from a moment of intense vulnerability. Uh, and this was 15, 16 years ago. I'd spent that month looking at points of intense exclusion, exclusion by age, by looking at care homes, by gender, working with gender disparity both in the Middle East and Colombia, elders in China, farmers in India. It was too much, and I ended up crying in the shower. And at that point, I thought, what if there's one thing that we could change that could change everything? And the answer came back, resounding back, leadership. If you change leadership, you change everything. So from that point of view, I also had another realization of what if most of what most of us are taught about leadership is wrong, and a quick Google search as to leadership training, and you realize most of it comes from business, business canvases, or law, or policy, or politicians. But actually, what about our mothers, our grandmothers, our school teachers? What about us? All of us have the ability to be a leader. So I think that's probably the number one thing that differs from traditional leadership models, which say you have to be born or trained into being a leader. You need to be an ego broadcasting from a podium. You need to be a medaled general or a kind of sharp suited CEO. But what about the more human, heartfelt angles? And that's really where creative leadership started. And I think one final thing to say there is I was seeing a lot of leadership training for specific groups, people of color in higher education, for a certain gender, a certain age. And I wanted to create a leadership model that was wholly human. So what did I turn to? Good old design. I feel design can make every conversation better. So applying it to different forms of leadership was a natural next step.
And I think that kind of picks up on one of my other questions that I kind of prepared is, what inspired your focus along the way? So could you tell us a little bit about kind of, you kind of just hinted on there. Were there any moments or people or anything realizations that inspired your focus on what you're doing today?
I think creative leadership and inclusive design have been inspired by hundreds of tiny conversations that have been had with thousands of people. I mean, creative leadership is a little bit of a silent giant because we have trained, um, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. We trained nearly 1,000 Hong Kong civil servants. And I think that first workshop, if I was to land on one example, was a moment because
Right.
the greatest I think the greatest praise people can give is, as a designer, is when they say what you did was unexpected. So I was they said to me, I was expecting a training in leadership and I got something different. And I
Yeah.
still remember that first cohort because they said, you didn't sit down and take us through a sort of PowerPoint of purpose is what I like to call them, where here's a diagram and we're going to go through this triangle or circle or these points. You brought us back to humanity. You told us two interesting things that, our purpose is in our name to work for civil society and to service that civil servant. And I think that's what creative leadership does. It's bringing people back to levels of humanity. So the inspiration is a thousandfold, but it's people saying things like, Sarah in Texas, who was put in charge of EDI after the murder of George Floyd, youngest of six siblings, and said she
Hmm.
was never going to be put in charge of anything. And her older five siblings laughed at her at Thanksgiving dinner because they said, what, you're in charge of something? There was Aylal from Azerbaijan, young, female, creative, three things that sort of worked against her in a kind of traditional structure. And there was Richard from the UK who had spent his last sort of savings, having lost his job, to come to our workshop. And those three people met in a workshop and we talked together, we laughed together, we cried together, and we learned together with their different situations. So why doesn't leadership look like that? Why are we shying away into um, teachings about leadership being so uncreative and so inhuman and inhumane?
Right. Right. Yeah, and what I love about the what you've just spoken about is just that you've kind of touched upon many areas of the globe and how everyone's kind of coming together and kind of feel the impact of this. So I just want to slightly pivot to inclusive design now, because I know that you're doing a lot of work, especially with the Helen Hamlyn Centre. You have done a lot of work in that area as well. So for our audience, could you define inclusive design and tell us a little bit why it's important to approach this in today's society?
So the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design actually defined the term in the early 90s, 93, 94 is when one of the founding directors, Roger Coleman, was thinking about this. And I really like the definitions that have grown up around it. The best one for me is including the widest number of people in your creative endeavor. And that's
Right.
really, really simple because who doesn't want that? When I see entrepreneurs, students, startups of today, they really
Mhm.
differ from 10, 15 years ago. You guys are amazing. Why do I say this? Because you're naturally inclusively minded. It doesn't need to be something that's taught, it's in your DNA. Because many people don't want to hear of themselves, they want to hear of their work, they want to hear of their patients, they want to hear of their customers, their colleagues. So inclusive design is a very open minded attitude to design that I think forms a key component. I would say it's been slightly overshadowed by, things like design for planet, design for sustainability. But people forget that a big part of sustainability is people.
Yeah.
It's behaviors. If a simple example, if you're trying to get everyone to recycle efficiently and effectively. How does an 80-year-old with two hip replacements living on the third floor of a apartment building get their recycling down to the pavement. And we actually worked in Hong Kong and around Europe on some of these kind of situations. So how does environmental sustainability land with social sustainability? So inclusive design continues to have a place. And I think it can speak to many things from politics to finance, etc.
I mean, yeah, even I think this is going to be so fascinating for many of our kind of our design alumni, students who are going through these programs, student people are looking to move into this space. I think it's such I don't think enough people are really, really thinking about it or even aware in many
Yeah.
cases. So, going back to some of the projects that you've worked on in the past, you mentioned some of the names of the brands that you've worked with. Could you give us an example of where inclusive design has truly made an impact on what they're trying to achieve?
Absolutely. And just to say to um, your listeners, inclusive design is something you're doing now. So,
Mm.
I don't want to sit here feeling like I'm a high priest at the altar of inclusivity preaching to convert. All you need to do is tap into your humanity. And I think that's what we have done with every project. So, over 20 years ago, Terminal 5 at Heathrow.
Mhm.
So at the centre, and this was a project as I was coming online as an inclusive designer myself, but this was a project done with um, the new Terminal 5, the crew that were building and speccing, and 250 architects and designers there. And we were asked to give an inclusive design layer. One of the things we did was conduct research, go out and see the difficulties people had. And they gave us 50 business users. We turned around and said, we don't need 50 business users. We need 5 people who will push the envelopes of what we're doing. So an 8-year-old girl, a 80-year-old couple who couldn't lift their suitcases, a visually
Mm.
impaired guy in his 60s, and a Japanese tourist who didn't speak English. Because you can design an airport for them, you can make it better for everyone. And the hundreds of things that we saw in filming their journeys through the old Terminal 1 made that terminal better. So we've done things like ambulances, taxis.
Yeah.
We've worked with medication packaging. So, we've applied inclusive design in critical areas such as hospital wards, but we've also
Mhm.
gone out to communities, communities of elders in China. We've worked in Africa. We've worked in Europe and even in South London looking at childhood obesity. So inclusive design is about bringing that level of understanding of people's exclusion, of their experiences of life, of the hate, the hurt, and the exclusion that they're experiencing, bringing that right into the designer's mind, the hand, and the creativity. And that's just such a powerful thing to do because it makes
Yeah.
sure that whatever you're designing, you're getting it right. You're getting it right because you're getting it right for people and you're getting it right for planet. So who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the approach, and I love the examples of the personas or the segments that you provided there, especially for building a new airport experience or designing a new airport experience. And that kind of leads me onto a question that, in terms of challenges of approaching and implementing inclusive design, are there any challenges that you can see that face designers, or are there any challenges that you see face designers when trying to kind of sell this in to businesses or to stakeholders?
That's a beautiful question, my friend. The big one is that we're misunderstood. And I have a
Right.
carefully researched process, findings
Hmm.
for this. Go into any Uber um, or Bolt or
Hmm.
Grab or, taxi and say to them you're a designer and look at what the next question is. Because they'll say graphics or fashion or maybe architecture. So you're locked into something that's already about, and the next question is about aesthetics or something like
Yeah.
that. So designers as givers of form and nothing more. But we are frameworkers, we are CEOs, we are facilitators, we are voices for the people we're designing for and with. And I think this is an incredibly powerful thing that people don't understand. So part of the designer's challenge is to move what we're doing upstairs and us upstream. And part of my work, and I've got a new YouTube channel that's launching that's all around this. It's about giving us the lexicon, the confidence, the power, and the purpose as designers, as creatives, as entrepreneurs, and innovators to be able to stand tall and breathe our wisdom and show our strength. Because you know, I come from an Asian background, and for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, I am an Indian male in my 40s with dark brown skin. I like to think it's 80% cocoa. I've got a neatly trimmed beard and a hairstyle that looks like I've just been electrocuted, so it's going straight up. Um, and that for me, why do I do a visual description? Because it's all part of the design of this podcast and this conversation to make things easier. So I think we have to stand in our own truths. We have to be able to express the power that design can bring and the transformation that design can have. And the final thing to say on that, because I could talk forever, is
Mhm.
um if I'm fundamental about anything, I'm fundamental about design. But one positive is that design is seen as non-threatening. So, if you're HR, especially nowadays, you could be viewed with a level of suspicion. What are HR doing here and what are they up to? Or accountancy or marketing or, senior leadership teams. But designers, we can walk through walls. You know, we're like superheroes from that point of view. Designers are fairly non-threatening. But the flip side of that is we can be seen as ineffectual and people that are just brought in to make things look pretty. And that is still a rhetoric that I hear echoing around the boardrooms and the businesses globally.
I think there's quite a, yeah, and it's fascinating what you said about kind of the HR side of things. We're working with a team at the moment in terms of our capability training, capability building training, and one of the teams mentioned that HR is not wanted at Christmas parties because of what they're going to see and what they're going to hear about. And I found that quite funny as well. Um, but now, just taking that everything you just kind of you just mentioned, I think there's a lot of great things around kind of the role of leadership, the role of the right qualities, and I think this kind of brings a nice segue into your book where you discuss a lot more about creative leadership, but specifically the integration of creativity, clarity, and empathy in this kind of approach to leadership. So, can you first of all just tell us a little bit more about the book itself, and I'd love to hear about kind of what inspired you to go off and to start putting it together. And then, yeah, just tell us a little bit about kind of those three pillars and what leadership can do to cultivate those qualities within their team.
Sure. So, quite a few questions there, but I'm going to wrap them into
Yeah, sorry.
different threads. No, I love it because it allows the mind and the heart to answer simultaneously. The
Mhm.
creative leadership is based on three values, which are empathy, clarity, and creativity. Now, back in the day, when I go back to that crying in the shower moment, and I started to rebuild myself and say, well, what can I do as a designer? I thought, well, one of the things people understand is a model. So what if we design a model? So empathy was a no-brainer, and that came to me as a human being. Creativity, well, that came to me as a designer. And the final one, clarity, took a little bit of time, but it actually started off with a relationship with an ex-girlfriend, which ended with in a sort of mess. And we've all had those relationships, uh, and
Yeah.
without any blame being attached anywhere, I realized at one moment, sitting next to a stranger on the plane, and he asked about why my face looked so sullen, and I told him the story, and he said to me, in a moment of clarity, you do realize your clarity is that you're not going to get clarity. And a couple of professional experiences as well led to the formulation of clarity. And being a designer, I love the stability of the triangle. So
Hmm.
the model was born. So clarity also links to head, empathy to heart, and creativity to hands. So it also has this kind of philosophical, body morphic, physiological, as well as yogic kind of vibration and resonance. And that's something where, creative leadership isn't just about another structure or strategy for the workplace. It's for life. It's for you. It's internal. It's all the things that you see within. So I always think there's this dichotomy where people are told, um, if you want to improve yourself, go running, eat, become vegan, do more yoga. But it's stuff that's left for the evenings and weekends. But what about psychological safety at work? Your example there of HR or whatever they call themselves nowadays, I've heard words like people and culture coming in, but not being wanted at Christmas parties. Um, it resonates. I think it might resonate with a lot of our listeners because um, it can feel like there's a lack of freedom and more kind of control and observation going on, and not in a great way. So how do you at work ensure that your staff, your people, your colleagues resonate and vibrate in the highest possible way, and that work is a safe and confident building place for them to be? And you're not just leading people below you, if we were to use the words of traditional hierarchy. You are leading people around you. I've come across security guards at places that I work who I would say are the leaders in the organization because they're the first welcome. They're the first wave of welcome. They are also the people who are incredibly kind, even though they've got this horrible name, security. They could be Robocop, they could be Terminator, but they act with a sense of empathy. So um, in terms of advice for people, it's a very, very, very simple. It's be connected, be kind, be observant, be conscious. Look at who's around you, who's missing in a conversation, who haven't you thanked, who are the quieter people, that may need their voices brought forward. And I think there's a sort of simple exercise of who haven't you seen and visibly thanked. And that's maybe something for all of our listeners out there, is just reflect on it in your family and at work. Was it someone who stayed up all night to finish the presentation? And did we all turn around and say, well, it's just their job because they're the intern? Or is it
Right.
your daughter at home, or your husband, or your partner, or your grandparents who you didn't see what they do? Did you thank them? And I know we're filming this right over the Christmas period, so now's a good time to put this into practice. So just some little things about human connectivity, bring that back into the organization. Don't treat the organization as just a place of Fordism, of function and factory. It's a place to live, to breathe and grow. So please, please, please do that.
Yeah, I think there's so many different thoughts going into my head now around where to kind of take this next bit of the conversation. And there's a lot of talk around kind of and obviously you've clearly done a lot of work with lots of kind of large organizations, global brands who need to be starting to think this way and starting to apply it. But now we're moving into 2025, and even just in the last couple of weeks, so much has been happening with AI, and it's the ability for AI agents to kind of start to do so much more work and help us build and be more productive is has never been greater, and it will just continue to kind of and pop into 2025. So my question now is, if you had to give any advice to somebody who is about to start a new venture, somebody who's starting a kind of a new organization, starting to build something from scratch, what can they be doing to make sure they are approaching inclusive design and creative leadership very early on in that journey?
So I think um, the sort of really important thing is speaking power to purpose. So very early on in your journey, it's just um, it's actually, what happens quite a lot with people when you're starting off, say, on an entrepreneurial or innovation journey, is fears will come in and start to almost erode at what that initial idea is that you want it to happen. I actually believe there's no such single thing as a road to Damascus moment. I believe you actually build up your insights and your innovations. One very simple thing that I do is, in your life, you will have people, um, when you have an idea, it's like growing a small plant, but the cold winds of other people's words or disbelief will attack you. The harsh, bright sunshine of your deepest critics, who are sometimes called your friends, will shine on it. So, how do you grow that inner plant of your idea and your confidence? And you sometimes have to shield it. You sometimes have to share it with the right people. And there's many tools and techniques we have in the book and in the workshops to help with this. But one of them is this. And I really like this one. I realized that if I got a challenging email that I needed to say, keep for posterity for whatever reasons, functional, operational, legal, or otherwise, I would put it into an email folder called cold storage. And because, like a fridge or a freezer, you know, you can, they self seal. So when you put that in there, you can self seal that, and that email sits in cold storage. It doesn't need to affect you any longer. But then I also realized you need another one called warm storage. So, we've all had emails or DMs or posts where comments where people have said, what you did was really great. Even if it's your grandmother saying this or your mother, who almost have to by law tell you you're doing great. I joke there, but, collect those things up into warm storage, and there'll be an insight, there'll be a bank of blessings that you build up that you can look to when times are dark, the road is hard, or it's difficult. And then you realize that actually dark and light are the same thing. Doing that was my realization. The dark and light are the same thing. Dusk and dawn are both endings and beginnings, because you actually have built up your own moments of support, and seek those people that energize you, but also challenge you in the right way, and step away from any energies that don't serve you. Be it a person, a place, a thing, step away from that. And I think that's really important as you're on the entrepreneurial journey. And one final little thing, it is the season to be jolly. Um, in the book, we talk about injecting a little bit of joy into your everyday. We are terrible critics of ourselves as human beings. So creative leadership for creatives, especially for creatives, and that's all of us, by the way, every single human, um, it encourages you to do something in your day that is joyful, be it that cup of tea, even if the day is so challenging, that
Mhm.
beverage, that cup of tea, that moment playing with a dog, or as I know someone called Amit does, golf.
Yep.
The time with the family, as I know
Yep.
we've talked about, or just
Yep.
standing and watching a sunrise or a sunset. And that
Yeah.
is incredibly important. So, and finally, if that inner critic comes in and says, "Oh, Rama, you idiot, you did this, you didn't save the file and it got completely lost," say three things that are actually positive. Even if it is, "Hey, Rama, you got up and you showered and you got out of bed this morning and you are
Yeah.
ready for the day." That's a positive. And,
Yeah.
Rama, you're going to have 30 seconds of swearing about losing the file, but then you're going to get up and recreate it because it'll take you 30 minutes. It's not the end of the world. Or, Rama, you are a good brother. You supported your sister. So it's the 3-to-1 ratio.
Yeah. Yeah, love that kind of approach and mindset to take into 2025. I think as many people are no, without doubt kind of thinking about kind of next year. And like I said earlier, so much opportunity, so much time to kind of and space to kind of build new things and to kind of continue to grow in different areas. I think having that mindset is absolutely right. So I kind of just want to now, with a couple of minutes left, just turn it back to a little bit about you and kind of your personal kind of goals. Tell us a little bit about what kind of excites you about kind of what's emerging trend wise, or kind of what does the next 5 or 10 years look like for you?
So I think one of the trends is this tension, battle, but it could be a convergence between artificial and human. We talk about artificial intelligence, but at the moment, those databases, those informations that we are bringing in are incredibly human and full of human biases as well. So recognizing, respecting the boundaries of that, I think, is incredibly important. And let's not forget that, all of us in our lives have said this phrase that I haven't heard from AI yet. And the phrase is this: I don't know. So, we'd have all been stopped in the street and someone will say, so where's the shops? Where's Tesco? And I don't know. But you ask AI and it'll be confidently wrong. It's like that, cousin or uncle that comes to family reunions and is confidently wrong about everything. So I'm looking forward to how we humanize the experiences, but also limit them. Because again, AI is a very powerful tool, but it could be dangerous. And I'm sure we will be talking about that on a future podcast, either yours or mine.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm really interested in that. I'm interested in how we expand definitions of inclusion, because different segments of society are excluded. But actually, one thing that we all have in common is all of us will have experienced to different degrees layers of exclusion. And what I see in the world is a lot of infighting between one group. It's like almost, how big is my exclusion compared to yours? But I'm a person of color. No, well, I'm a person of this gender. No, I'm a person of this age. And actually, creative leadership is a humble offering to the world to be more equitable and more kind and more connected, and recognize that if we're all on this planet, we all have some work to do and we have some work to do together. And our work is about stepping through exclusion. So stepping beyond the rhetoric of exclusion that lives in so many things, from newscasts to podcasts, from kind of books to boardrooms. So genuinely, that's a big ask. And personally, what am I looking forward to? Well, if I may take myself back to being 6, you can see behind me I love books. And this is
Yeah.
just a tenth of the library that I have that you can see on screen. But I always had a dream to have my name on a book with a little penguin next to it. And next year that happens. The creative leadership book moves to Penguin, and an audio book, an ebook, as well as a paperback. So that is a huge personal achievement. And I almost want to bring it back to that, because what I've been speaking about could be quite global concepts, but
Yeah.
I want to bring it back to what you can do. And I think, finally, it's just to say, follow your creative heart. Creativity gets educated out of us. So be creative, even in the way you plan a dinner party, even in the way you go to work. Go different routes. Neuroplasticity, a research shows that your brain will thank you. Brush your teeth with your left hand. Do lots of little things to keep that creative impetus going, because the world needs to see that creativity is a solution to many, many of the ills around us. And creativity also bridges your strength, your love, and your light into those around you. And who won't want to follow you or be with you or be next to you or see you? So this is also about the world, but it's also about you.
Listen, I mean, we're recording this on a Monday morning, and I think that's super left me very, very inspired. Everything you've just mentioned there. So I think that's the absolute right message. And obviously, congrats on the book. And obviously, we'll be sharing out the relevant links and keeping an eye on that. I'm very personally, again, very excited to have you speak at one of our conferences next year. I think we've already spoken about kind of what we're going to be building as well. There's one thing I think you left off, which is your YouTube channel. So, in closing, I know you're going to be spreading a lot of wisdom and knowledge through your YouTube channel. So, in closing, can you just tell us a little bit about that and what your plans are for the channel?
Fantastic. And thank you for remembering. The YouTube channel is my name, Rama Gheerawo. And the subtitle at the moment is The Definitive Design Channel. May sound a little egotistical, but the folks that are working around me have taken 6 months to persuade me to have that title. What is it about? Well, it's about showcasing the power of design. It's not just for designers, it's for anyone with a creative bone. It's about life wisdoms as well. And it's also talking about creative leadership. There is going to be a sister channel to that, which is called the Tea Shop, because the Tea Shop is a place for conversations. So that's launching early next year. And that's a series of conversations. So it's kind of podcast style conversations. And, you know, Amit, we really look forward to welcoming you on that. I know we've got a date to film that. So the tables will turn a little bit, and we'll be delving into your life, your career. So the ethos of the two channels is that it's not that everyone has a story to tell, it's that everyone has a story to be heard. And our deepest wisdoms come from those quietest, most powerful moments, and that everyone contributes to human knowledge and human existence. So do subscribe, hit the notification bell on the Rama Gheerawo channel, which is live and running, and keep an eye out for the tea shop as it comes online.
Beautiful. I think, yeah, we'll definitely share out the relevant links when we publish the podcast, as well as links to the book and where people can access that as well. I've loved this conversation. I'm feeling very inspired. There's tons of stuff I want to go off and build. Obviously, continue to build Experience House, but other things as part of that as well. So I think you've left me certainly with some really good insights of kind of how to approach that, and I'm sure our audience will have taken that away as well. Rama, a pleasure to have you with us today. I think we've been trying to get this in and booked in for quite a while. I'm glad we found time during the holiday season to make it happen. Thank you once again. Is there anything else that you'd love to add, that you'd like to add?
I think there's 3 words that I end most of the YouTube broadcasts and podcasts with, and that's just wishing everyone joy, faith, and grace in equal measure. So thank you.